You have to figure out what is reinforcing. And I think a lot of times, many trainers, owners, or whatever jump to the food because they're like, my dog loves food. And you have to think that food may not be the most reinforcing thing at that given time. Who cares if your dog can do all the things you ask, but they look miserable or sad? And,
Yeah,
the
suppressed.
thing, yeah, the whole thing that really bums me out is people are always like, how do I calm my dog down? How do I calm my dog down? And to me, I'm like, man, how about what talent can I find in my dog to bring out the best in them so they feel like they could be somebody.
Yeah.
Nobody likes a bad dog till there's trouble at the door.
Welcome to the Vermont Dog Trainer Show, your common sense, down-to-earth advisor on all things dog training. Here's your host, Ian Grant.
Welcome to the show today. I've got Jill Viggiani. She's from here from MotoDog Training in another Vermonter, Montpelier, Vermont. She's just down the road from me. And full transparency, we hung out a little bit a couple of weeks ago. I did some training with my dog Fitz and had a great time. So Jill, welcome aboard here.
Thanks for having me.
I don't know if many people know this. I don't really work with truly aggressive dogs. I don't. I think a long time ago, a trainer friend of mine said, you can make the same amount of money working with puppies and dogs that may just have trouble walking on leash and such. So Jill is my go-to person. If I've got a dog that is hitting people pretty hard and causing stitches and stuff, and I send them your way. So has that always been the case with you, Jill? Be able to work with those types of dogs?
I have worked with, a lot of aggressive dogs in the past, but as of recently, I feel there's much more of a need for it. And there's just definitely been, I'd say over the past 3 years or so, I've been taking on more aggressive dogs and dogs that have issues with other dogs or dogs that have issues with humans.
Do you think that's a product of COVID?
Gosh, wow. It could be, yes, COVID definitely has not helped many dogs, but I also do think it has to do with maybe people not getting the right breed or understanding the breed that they have. Could also be, just there's more dogs out there, I think, in the world too. So I think that plays a factor as well.
Yeah. There's more dogs. There's more activity. People are, especially here in Vermont, the amount of people that take their dogs places. You ever notice that compared to other? I mean, obviously we're not living in, the 49 other states, but I think Vermont's a pretty safe place to say, like, people bring their dogs everywhere.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think it's great for the dogs that want to be everywhere and enjoy that. But I think the expectations also are set a little bit high for folks that see their neighbor bringing their golden retriever everywhere and thinking that, their aggressive German Shepherd should be able to do those things. And maybe their German Shepherd doesn't want to do those things. I think that there might be some social pressure involved with that as well, I feel.
So how did you get your start in this, and how long have you been doing this for?
Oh boy. Okay. So let's reel it way back. When I was a kid, and I'm talking 9, 10, 12, 13 years old, I was a little bit of an entrepreneurial and I had my own dog walking business. I didn't at the time have my own dog, so I had to prove to my parents that I could do this. So I actually had a cat that I trained as a dog. I taught him, to walk on the leash. I taught him all sorts of tricks. I taught him all
Really, a
these
cat on a
things.
leash.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I lived in more of a suburban area where it was maybe a little bit too, I grew up right outside of New York City and it might've been a little too risky to just, let the cat outside because you get hit by a car. So
Sure.
I proved to my parents that, I could train a cat. So they later let me have a dog, which was cool. And I started a little dog walking business when I was a kid. And that was pretty cool. And, little dog sitting and walking and stuff. So, fast forward a little bit, when I was, gosh, this is almost 20 years ago when I got my first dog as an adult, I, did all the things with her and really got involved in training. I got involved in dog sports with her because one, I've always been an athlete my whole life. And when I found out you could do sports with your dog, I thought that was the coolest thing in the
Mm.
world. So I, did a ton of training with her, all sorts of things, just wanted to have her part of my life with me, and got involved in agility. And that sort of caught the sort of training bug and sort of got the wheels spinning in my head in terms of, man, I want to learn as much as I can about dogs and dog behavior and that sort of thing. So I did agility with her, and while we both were new at it, she I think did it because I asked her to do it. Not necessarily it was not her true talent, let's
You're
just
doing
say.
this and you're going to like it.
Yeah, she did it, but it wasn't her true talent. And I think all dogs have a talent, and that may not have been hers, but we both sort of learned through the process. And I got involved with dogs through dog sports. So I did I had another dog I did agility with. I competed on the national level with him. And again, my thirst for knowledge sort of grew and grew and grew. I would take as many seminars and workshops and things like that. He was an incredible dog, but he also too had some behavioral struggles in terms of dog aggression. And I really had to understand why, how, where, what's going on, because I was hell bent on. He was an incredible an agility dog, but if you've ever been to an agility trial, there's dogs everywhere, and there are dogs screaming and excited and borderline out of control. And you can't have an aggressive dog doing things like that. That's you'll get kicked out. You'll just, it's dangerous. So I had to learn how to work with him in a way that create that true cooperation. And because we became such a good team, I was able to compete with him on the national level and do really well. I mean, he was ranked the number 2 boxer in the country for a number of years.
Wow.
But no one really knew that he struggled with other dogs, because I was able to have that, trust and cooperation with him, so he wouldn't necessarily go off the rails and, go after other dogs. And I'd tell people after, I'm like, yeah, he's actually really dog aggressive. And most people had no idea, because he was never in a situation to fail. So kind of fast forwarding, I got involved in the sport of Schutzhund as well, which, I actively compete in. This whole time, I was working in the corporate world. I had many, many corporate jobs. I was a art director, graphic designer, and worked for some of the big names, here in Vermont, some of the larger businesses. And that definitely didn't fuel my soul. And, the way business works is there's always restructuring, and there were many times I'd get laid off and have to find a new job. And, it just the ebbs and flows of working for corporations, and especially here in Vermont, because Vermont is a very small state and there's not a ton of opportunities and a ton of, ways to be successful in Vermont. Right. So at that point, my partner, James, who is the other half of MotoDog Training, he was sort of the mastermind brain child behind creating the business that we have now. As it was when, I was doing the corporate world, I was literally spending every weekend and every free moment training my dog. People were asking for help with their dogs. I was traveling to workshops, trials, basically every free moment. And he turned to me and said, I think we can do this as a full-time gig. And of course, I'm like, you're crazy. No. And he was the driving force, I would say, behind coming up with the business plan, structuring the business, giving me the courage essentially to say, like, yeah, we can do this as a team.
Yep.
So, we worked with an outside friend designer, because we both have a design background, but when you're that close to something, you kind of have to farm things out. Right.
Yeah.
And we worked with a friend, and literally within 4 to 6 weeks, we got the business off the ground and started training dogs. And that was about 6 years ago.
Wow. So when you are first starting, or 20 plus years ago, and you're just kind of dabbling in this, so internet's still kind of new, right? There's not like, dog training Facebook pages. There's not trainers around every corner. So how are you educating yourself back then to, eventually compete in the national level? Because that's a humongous step from just doing things yourself to the big stage.
Totally. Yeah. It definitely was a different world there than, now it's, you get on social media or whatever, everyone's a dog trainer and there's just a plethora of knowledge. So, about 20 years ago or so, I was really diving deep in terms of, reading books, word of mouth, getting on the road and traveling to work with different people that I've heard of and that sort of thing. So I really, when I kind of get involved in something, I get really involved in
Feet
things.
first,
So,
right?
I put myself out there and I would ask questions. I would volunteer. I mean, I even did things. I did a lot of volunteer work with a boxer rescue of New England. I would try any way I can to sort of fill my cup with knowledge from anyone that was willing to give me the time of day.
And then at some point you're doing these dog sports, and then you got some sort of, off in the distance you heard about competing at national levels or local levels and that kind of thing. So what is that step like, to go and be like, okay, I'm not only going to put my skills out in the front of everybody, but I'm going to put my dog into an environment and an atmosphere that we've never been in. And
Yeah.
because it's one thing for us as a human to feel a little nervous about, maybe being up on stage. It's another thing to put our dog in front of people and judges and that kind of thing. And obviously you're feeling different as a human, and your dog has to still perform the way you want it to in that environment. So what is that step like?
Yeah, that's a big step, and that's the thing too, is that's one of the reasons why I enjoy competitions and doing dog sports, is because it really tests your training and it tests your and your dog's teamwork, and it tests exactly what you've been preparing for. And that to me is sort of the pinnacle of dog training, because all collars are off, there's no leashes. It's just you and your dog, and the environment as well. And learning to work with your dog through, what we call competing reinforcers is something that is a lot of times the thing that most even pet owners struggle with their dogs. So understanding how to work with your dog in an environment like that and knowing like, hey, we're ready for this is huge and huge. I'd say the majority of the time I'm helping folks with their dog is, my dog listens great if the environment is set up in the perfect
Yeah.
sterile, quote unquote, Skinner box, right? But then you go out into the real world and all bets are off. So that's kind of where dog sports really is the proving and testing grounds of how well can you and your dog cooperate in an environment that could be stressful, could be distracting, could be all of these things.
Yeah.
And that's when like, man, our training is, yes, we know this, we're good.
Yeah, it's spot on.
Yeah.
Because the other part of it, people come to us, my dog is reactive towards other dogs on leash, or, I don't know, we're always looking at ways that we can recreate those situations. We work on our relationship. We get everything in the right place. But then when reality hits, we can only stage so much as trainers, without going into the real world. When you're competing, it's not like you can stage having judges around and people around. That's not really, I guess, the very plain version is you can't train for that, but you kind of can, right? You can train your dog into those skills, but you can't set that stage before you actually go and compete, right? So that's a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, I think it's important to teach, to have those concepts with your dog, right? So when you develop that type of relationship and cooperation with your dog, those concepts can translate to the real world setting. And this is something I often teach with my clients and their dogs, because, like you said, you can't exactly paint the picture. And even if you do, that picture can change. That picture is never going to be the same. So if you're able to work with your way in order to teach them these types of concepts, it's huge. And a lot of the things that, we work on and we teach is, I'll kind of, rewind it back a little bit too, is I'm a certified training without conflict professional trainer. I went through Ivan Balabanov's course about 2 years ago. And there are, elite few, gosh, I don't even know how many now, but there are international that, hold the title of being a TWC certified trainer.
Yeah, I think there's 90 people worldwide now.
Yeah, it's cool. There's a person in Australia, I think, that's certified, and I want to say maybe Singapore, I want to say, which is cool, which is awesome, which is great. A lot of the things that I've built on and learned through the program and through Ivan is learning about the importance of having that appropriate level of cooperation and teaching a lot of these concepts through play.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about teaching your dog to play in a cooperative way with you is it really helps build that social interaction. It really helps build that cooperation. It builds that communication and really helps establish that us mentality between you and your dog versus more of this sort of transactional way of thinking. With my own dogs, I could literally pull them out of the car and be in one of the busiest environments in the world, and my dogs just get out of the car and look at me like, what are we doing together?
Yeah.
What can we do
Team
together?
effort.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not, under obedience the whole time. They're just, you and me, we're best friends. What can we do together? We're going to take on the world. And I want to establish that kind of relationship with everyone and their dogs.
It's interesting. You brought up Ivan, and it was around COVID time, right? Shut down. Not much is happening in the world, and that's when I kind of was just digging around for stuff. It's different when you're not working with dogs in front of you every day. Now, for dog trainers, we have to keep our brain kind of moving and whatnot. And I had come across his stuff and his videos, and I was like, what is happening here? It took a lot to process, and even 3 years later, as I watched the videos, I'm still processing. And I think, this was a question I had down for further in, but I'm going to jump on it right now because play is super important with dogs. So my golden retriever Fitz, I told you when we met up with him that, day one when I brought him home, I don't even know if I'd got him in the house yet. I had grabbed a ball and we started playing, 8 weeks old, right out in the front yard.
Perfect.
And he's been that way. We've played, I wouldn't say we played daily ever since then, but we play a lot. And it is so different of a relationship than what I have ever experienced. And I haven't owned a lot of dogs, but, a handful. It is so different of a relationship. Why do you think that is, Jill? If you could dig in a little bit, obviously you're certified in this. I don't even want to say method. I think that's a very loose term for truly what it is. But let's dig into this a little bit. Why is it so important to an owner and their dog?
Yeah, no, and I think that's so cool that, 8 weeks old, you just picked up a ball and started playing with him. And that's something I tell so many puppy owners. People are like, yeah, I got to work on the leash stuff, this. I said, don't do anything except play with your dog.
Yeah.
Because especially a puppy, at that age, the world is so new and play is something that is innate, right? There is something when it comes to play that it is something that all dogs want to do. It's something all human beings want to do. And if you can start that off when they're young and help develop that relationship with your puppy at such a young age, it just makes everything so much easier. You don't have to get hung up on behaviors and this and that. It makes all that come so much easier later in life. All beings want to play, and I think if you nurture that when they're young, they just continue to build and grow and that sort of thing. I mean, the amount of dogs that I've worked with where the owners are like, he doesn't like to play.
Yes,
and
I hear that a lot too.
I call BS on that, because the one thing is you have to understand that there is a genetic component, and maybe not all dogs want to play the same exact way as, say, your golden retriever.
Sure.
But finding some type of game, whether it's a chase and catch, possession games, or something in between, to help build that relationship and build a mutual agreement between you and your dog is huge. Because you think about it, it's play is something in terms of hierarchy that comes way up there, like way up there. When all your other needs are met, you've slept, you've eaten, you've pottied, all that, play is up there. Play is one of the highest, primary reinforcers, if you want to start going there. And being able to develop that with your dog, truly, and you've seen it, it creates this unflappable relationship between you and your dog where, You're not begging for their attention or trying to lure them away with food. It just creates this us mentality. And on top of it, it teaches your dog to have that sense of self, really, teaches them to be somebody. And at the same time, you think about dogs, whether they're a mixed breed dog or a purebred dog, they have a genetic component. They have some sort of biological need that needs to be fulfilled. And being able to do that through play is huge. Whether you have like your dog, he's a golden retriever, retrievers in his name. I'm pretty certain, not well, I mean, I've had to teach many like Goldens how to play chase and catch, but you think like that's going to be more his jam, so to speak. Right. I mean, I've got a boxer, and yeah, he plays chase and catch like a maniac, but he truly loves possession games. He loves the fight. He loves the, roughhousingness of it. He likes to feel empowered. He loves that sort of thing. So I think the important thing is, one, learning how to be a good player, because, oftentimes I'll tell people, hey, no offense, but you suck at this.
Yeah. And the other part of it too, I find, is when you want a client to play with their dog in front of you, it's almost like you're asking them to dance to a song.
Totally. Yeah. They feel like,
yeah.
Yeah. And I usually say, pretend I'm not here. I'm over here. Or oftentimes too, I might pull out one of my dogs that, they would probably play with a corpse, but I like, go play with my dog, and that way it loosens them up a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, there's things like mechanics that can be improved and stuff like that, but a lot of times, I say just pretend like nobody's watching, or don't care what people think if you act silly and stuff like that.
Yep,
for sure.
And I think that's the time to let loose. And that's one thing I've noticed with Fitz too, and I've developed it with May, my Frenchie, and then Gemma, my Swissy, who is sleeping on the floor over here next to me. I didn't do any of that when she was younger, and I think both as dog owners and as dog trainers, we can look back at other dogs and go, oh, I wish I could have done that with that dog. We can do it so many times. So that's the feeling I get with her is, oh, but the good news is I'm trying now, and I've seen some spunk out of her lately, and she tried to play with my wife the other day, like looking at the ball, looking at her, like, are we gonna do this? Like,
nice.
Yeah, and she certainly she'll give you a good 3 or 4 minutes of play, and then she's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go do something else. But it's definitely more than what it was, and it's interesting to see the different stages that each of my dogs are in. So I know you as a trainer, when you see dogs come in for board and trains, you're seeing all different levels and stages of, knowing where to start and how to approach that. But what would you say? Do you think people need to play with their dog every day, several times a day? Where do you think, if somebody's listening to this and going, wow, I've never really thought about interacting with my dog that much with play, what's your prescription here? What are you telling them to do?
I mean, I think it really is going to depend on the breed of dog you have, or your lifestyle. And I always tell folks this is, people like, oh, I got to train my dog, and let me like put it in my Google Calendar and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Most times when people see me actually training my own dogs, they think I'm just playing with them.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes we might be playing ball, but then we might infuse some healing, or we might infuse some other things into it. And I think any interaction you have with your dog can be that of play. I mean, I will play with my dogs. Literally, we'll train for an hour straight, and people are like, "Isn't that crazy?" I'm like, "We've probably threw the ball 50 times in that hour, and maybe asked for 4 things." But I think any opportunity you can to play with your dog and is a great opportunity, and not just play in your backyard. Take the show on the road. Go down to your local off-leash friendly. I don't want to tell people cut their dogs off leash in illegal areas.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Being able to take their dogs to, places to be able to play with them. Because the other thing that does as well is it creates that mentality with your dog that we could be anywhere and there's an opportunity for us to play. The crazy thing is the more you do that, the less you're like, oh, he's going to take off on me, or there's that big term in the dog training world called engagement. And
yep,
that's a whole other conversation, but I'll just use that phrase loosely, is your dog will be more engaged with you you have that type of playful relationship with them. I mean, sure, there might be times where it's pouring rain out and I don't throw the ball for my dogs just for risk of injury and stuff, but I do try to, you know, do some level of play with all of my dogs at least once a day, if not more, depending on how busy I am, if it's raining out or snowing out or whatever, you know.
Yeah. How do you feel that I mean, let's take this for example of a dog that wants to bark at other dogs while they're walking on leash. And a lot of times I kind of find that the owner might be a little disengaged, and not disengaged from yeah, I'm just going to ignore this on purpose, but disengaged because they're just not sure what to do, how to handle it. And they don't play with their dog. And the more and more I've learned about this stuff, along with past experiences, the more I'm learning how much the relationship has to do with why that dog is reacting the way that it is. That it's not just this, like, you have to bear with me for a moment. It's not just this pod that sits on its own that says my dog is just reactive at this point and barks and lunges, but everything else in the world is great. I have a hard time believing that because I sometimes feel like there's an imbalance, a gap, if you will, in the relationship. What's your thought? Am I onto something? Am I coming out of left field? What do you think?
No, I think you are onto something there for sure. You know, there's always that, you know, my dog's great until, or
Yeah.
you know, that sort of scenario. But yeah, I mean, definitely breakdown in that relationship or communication could definitely cause dogs to, you know, and again, the word reactive drives me crazy because it's such a, you know,
It's a
people
loaded
might say
word.
reactive. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it doesn't quite describe what's going on, but understanding a lot of times the root of some behaviors like that could be based in the fact that there's a breakdown in that relationship and that communication for sure. You know, that combined with a little bit of habituation, right? That's, I see another dog, I do this, and
Yeah.
that
Autopilot.
kind of thing. But yeah, there definitely the majority of dogs that I've worked with owners that dog acts inappropriately, we'll say, on the
Yeah.
leash,
It's a good word.
definitely stems back from a lack of cooperation and a breakdown in their relationship from the get-go. It's not like this isolated pod of this is everything else is great, but this.
Yeah.
Like rewind that and go back about 100 steps, and you know you'll find sort of the root of why that's happening.
Yeah. The other big term in our world is my dog is distracted.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? It stares at this thing, it looks at that thing, and
sure,
and scans the
sure.
landscape. It's always
Yeah,
distracted.
yeah, yeah,
We can look at that. Early on in my career, if I heard my dog is distracted, I go, okay, well, it's not focused on you, yada yada yada, right? But how do you handle that? Somebody says my dog is distracted, Jill, and I don't know. I can't snap them out of it, right? That's kind of the
yeah,
big thing is I can't get their focus back on me.
sure, sure.
How do you address that or even just start that conversation?
Yeah, I like to call it competing reinforcers, right? So, you know, at that moment in time, your dog finds X, Y, and Z more reinforcing than whatever else you're dealing with,
Yeah.
right? Or whatever, whether it's like focusing on you or the task at hand or anything like that. So, you know, a lot of how we train is we start from working with dogs in those types of quote unquote distracting environments, right? Because you know, let's say a lot of times people start with working with their dogs in a sterile environment in the house, doing sits for cookies in front of the refrigerator that's filled with roast beef.
Yeah.
And then they go outside and they're like, my dog doesn't even know what sit means. And I said, yeah, exactly. You know, it's the kind of thing where you kind of set your dog up for failure right there.
Yeah.
You know, so understanding how to build, and again, play creates that sort of mutual connection and cooperation from the get-go. I just had a lesson with a client who worked on this stuff. You know, he was a very distractible dog, and within minutes she's playing ball with him while I'm out playing ball with my dog. And you
Mm.
know, it was kind of cool to watch the whole scenario unfold. But yeah, it's we like to call it competing reinforcers.
Yeah. And that's a big transformation for somebody that hasn't had focus with their dog to now playing with their dog while you're out there with your dog, because that's
So
not like you're just standing there while your dog is sitting. That's a lot of energy that can be seen from some dogs, and they want to react more towards that, or rather than focus on their owner. So that had to have been amazing for the owner to experience that.
Oh yeah, she was just jaw dropped. It was amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I had a client in yesterday. It's like a Great Pyrenees mix of some sort, and they're their own dog, right? That's a lot of dogs sometimes.
For sure.
And so we've been working for a little over a year, just slowly, right? Because the dog originally didn't want to let anybody in the house, just barking, growling, snarling, and stuff. And
Well, typical of a Great Pyrenees in
kind of,
term of their who and what they are, right?
yeah, and doing their job,
Genetically.
absolutely. So you can't
Genetically.
fault them for doing what their DNA
Sure.
says, but they're in the human world too.
Sure.
And so yesterday they were in for an appointment, and it was the first time. And I've been pushing play so hard on them, and yesterday was the first time that dog, I could actually play with a tennis ball with that dog. And to see, it was only for about 30 or 45 seconds. It wasn't long, because that dog has always kind of looked at me like, what are your intentions? And never has really, I shouldn't say never, but just always on guard, doing its DNA thing to a degree. But it was a cool moment to be like, you loosened up for a little bit with me. Like, I caught you. You're doing it.
Sees you, changes that picture a little bit too. And yeah, that's another thing that, is important to show dogs too. The picture may not be exactly what you think it is.
Yeah. Because
Blowing his mind a little
their
bit.
perception is reality, right? It is what they think that it is at that moment. But we do have the ability to change that, over time as well.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that we're talking, and you brought up the whole roast beef thing. When you talk about, reinforcers between play and food, I think most dog trainers in their life have used food at one point or another with training their dogs. And I mean, I have in the past as well. And sometimes I feel like there is a little need of it depending on what we're doing. What's your experience between the two? Because obviously we talk a lot about positive reinforcement in the world of dog training, and people want to be able to get the most out of their dogs. So when it comes to play and food, what's your approach and what's your experience with each?
Yeah. And I think like you said, it's not that I never use food in training or anything like
Yeah.
that. One thing that is super important to point out is you have to figure out what is reinforcing. And I think a lot of times, many trainers, owners, or whatever, jump to the food because they're like, my dog loves food. And you have to think that food may not be the most reinforcing thing at that given time.
Yeah.
And that is the truth, right? What could be the most reinforcing is running to chase those birds, or depending on, what the dog finds reinforcing, and again, the situation as well. Food sometimes I think can be used in a way that is more of a transactional sort of approach to working with your dog,
Yep.
And many times you see, the sort of antecedent or the thing of the hip pouch with the food. The dog's like, yeah, we're in training mode, I better pay attention. Or they know you have cookies in your pocket, and that kind of thing. And it's a little bit, dare I say, bribery, or more, like I said, transactional.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm going to do the thing because you're going to give me the thing, sort of thing. Or you even reward the dog, quote unquote, with food, and the dog's kind of like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It isn't truly reinforcing. You don't see the dog, my gosh, I'm so glad, I'm so happy.
Yeah.
So being able to manipulate reinforcers, and this could go down the rabbit hole of whether they're
Good.
positive or negative, right?
Yeah.
Positive or negative reinforcers as well, can be important. But the reason that I think using play, and I'm not talking about toy either, right? Because many times it's like people that start adding more play into their training kind of go about it the same way as if they were using food, but they just happen to reward with toy. So that's, not necessarily what I do, or even like TWC methodology or anything like that. The thing about play is again, it's more of a social cooperative interaction that you're never going to get from just transactional food. I mean, human beings, sure, we go out, we share a meal together and stuff like that. You don't necessarily do that with a dog. You share a moment in time where the two of you are truly engaged in enjoying each other's company, and it's a sort of mutual back and forth thing. if you think about something that you absolutely love to do, I'm a big mountain biker. If I'm out mountain biking with my friends and we take a break and my friend's like, hey, you want a cheeseburger? I mean, don't get me wrong, I love cheeseburgers, but at that given moment, I'm gonna be like, hell no, I don't want a cheeseburger right now. Let's
Right.
finish the climb on this on this trail.
Yeah.
So you really have to think about what it is that is reinforcing to the dog.
And the other part that's kind of hit me lately with thinking about the both too is you always feel like at some point the food goes away, or that you would like it to go away. Or we hear as trainers and even dog owners, we have to wean off of the treats or wean off of the food. And I look at play like you don't have to wean off of that. You can just keep enjoying yourself and keep training that way too. So do you find that? I mean, that's a big difference between the two as well.
Well, here's the thing is the ultimate goal is to make the thing itself reinforcing, right? So if you're
And
always
you mean
like,
the thing itself by the command
sure, yeah, command anything,
or action or whatever. Yeah.
absolutely, coming when called. That's yay. That I love coming when called. This is actually fun for me.
Yeah.
If I have two Belgian Malinois and they love healing, and I'm talking focus, prancy heel. To them, they truly enjoy the act of healing with me together. And it's something that if I pulled this guy Co out of the crate right now and he would push himself into me and like, we're healing now. I love healing. So, you've reached that level where all of a sudden the dog actually enjoys doing the activity with you. And that in itself becomes reinforcing because the way it's been, guided, it's the act of doing that. He's like, man, I love this. You can see the joy and the vibration in the dog. And that's when you're there, right?
Yeah.
When
Yes.
the act itself of doing things with you, whether it's playing ball, sitting, downing, walking nicely on a leash, not busting out of the door, all of that thing becomes the joyful thing. That's when you've reached that level with your dog and you're just, you can feel good. You're in a good place.
Yeah. And that's what I've also noticed about this too, is that it brings the happy-go-lucky energy out of the dog owner that also gets into the dog as well. So whether you have a nervous or scared dog, they experience happy-go-lucky to kind of build them up. Whether you have the dog that is truly just happy-go-lucky and this is throwing fuel on the fire, so they experience it. Or if you've got a dog that's pretty assertive, pretty forward, and you make them feel that way, that's one thing I've noticed too is I think my personal energy has shifted, especially working with dogs, because you got to bring that out. Even if you're kind of having a bad day, like you got to bring out that happy-go-lucky so you can share that experience together.
Absolutely. And the emotions of the dog should always come first. I mean, who cares if your dog could do all the things you ask, but they look miserable or sad and, the whole,
suppressed.
The whole thing that really bums me out is people are always like, how do I calm my dog down? How do I calm my dog down? And to me, I'm like, man, how about what talent can I find in my dog to bring out the best in them so they feel like they could be somebody?
Yeah.
Your dog eventually after that will learn how to settle and they will be calm. It's amazing to see if you could take an anxious, worried, stressed dog, show them how they could feel confident and powerful and do that through play. It's amazing to see a lot of those anxious behaviors melt away from the dog. And then, hey, look, they settle on the house. So many times people focus so much on settling the dog down where it's almost the opposite. It's like, hey, why don't you bring out the quote unquote inner beast in them or teach them to feel like they are powerful. And it's amazing to see how, they start to feel like, man, I could do this. I have this level of confidence now.
Yeah.
And when dogs have confidence and when dogs have clarity, and then all of a sudden, they're no longer stressed out. They're no longer anxious and they feel comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah. Are you a nature-loving dog owner? Introducing Roaming, the premium lifestyle brand from Los Angeles that's all about embracing the beauty of nature. Roaming brings you high-quality, earth-friendly dog products crafted from renewable and natural materials. Their standout product, bio-based and 100% compostable dog poop bags. I've been using Roaming bags for months, and let me tell you, They're a game changer. Durable, smooth, eco-friendly, and never any holes in them. These bags are good for your dog and Mother Earth. And here's the best part. Roaming has an exclusive offer for our listeners. Use code VermontDog to snag a whopping 20% off your first purchase. Sign up for their poop bag subscription and enjoy 20% off the first 3 orders. Oh, and don't miss their stunning leather leashes, proudly made right here in the USA. Ready to make your dog's world a little greener? Visit roaming.com. That's ROMNG.com. Roaming, where nature and dogs come together in perfect harmony. So I gotta throw something out. It's been on my mind lately, and I was even gonna put it on social media. Sometimes, I think in some cases, probably rare cases, I think taking a dog for a walk would be suppression. Especially if that dog is wound up tighter than a 10-day clock and they just want to get out and run.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you walk too, right? So
Yeah.
majority of times when, and I mean, I live rural and, I don't, here we go. I don't leash walk my dogs.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't, I mean, unless I'm somewhere and they have to, they know how to walk on a leash. But especially for owners that maybe live in a more like a city or situation where they're suburban and they do take their dogs for walks, I tell them play with your dog first before you go on a walk.
Yeah.
Because what that does is it does create that us mentality. We're doing something together.
Mm-hmm.
It helps shed some of that, excess sort of wound up, spent up energy for sure. And, make sure that you're connected and some of that energy gets out. Then go for a leash walk and, teaching a dog to heel or walk real close by your side is fine and good and all. But if you're going to go walk 15 blocks or 2 miles that way, I don't think that's fair. What I like to do is you have whatever length your leash is, whether it's 6 feet or 10 feet, just don't pull me from kingdom come and don't cut me off.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big believer in getting out to take dogs for a walk. I think it's a part of the equation. I don't think it's everything by any means, because play is a big part of it. I mean, it just is. And I think there has to be a balance. And that's why I was sitting there. I was like, man, some dogs come in, they're wound. They haven't been walked for, a month, and where that's really the only outlet for the dog other than just, the backyard that's 20 by 20 and it's fenced in, and they've just had no outlet whatsoever. And I think in those cases, somehow getting that energy out, and if it can be in play and making it productive and efficient, then why the heck not?
Yeah. And sometimes too, I've definitely I have a dog treadmill, and if getting the dog to run and getting that sort of endorphins
Yes.
up is super helpful. And many times I've done this where, I had one dog in for training he was pretty aggressive. But his owner used to run with him a lot. And, I'm an ex-runner. My joints don't like running as much anymore, but I still run a bit. But I would run with him every day because I knew it was good for him. And really, he didn't like going at that slow pace. And I definitely will bike dogs too. Get them to run alongside on my bike just to really help get some of that energy out, especially if they're not proficient in play yet or they're not comfortable yet. Yeah. Many times when I get dogs in for a board and train, we'll go either for a real brisk walk with not a whole lot of you have to walk by my side kind of thing. Just don't pull me into a car or something.
Yep.
Or I'll get them right away biking with me because it's a good way to get their heart rate up and get them to kind of like, get rid of some of that stress.
Yeah. Do you mountain bike with your dogs or?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mountain bike with my dog Koa. And obviously off leash and worked a lot with him in terms of, teaching him how to heel alongside my bike and teaching him a behind command, as well. And worked a lot with some owners as well that wanted to learn how to bike or ski with their dogs because, it's one thing to hike with your dog off leash, which is great, but, being attached to a bike or being attached to skis and having that level of control and stuff with them, makes it a little bit more challenging, right?
Sure. Do you think for an everyday dog owner, they should run their dog every day? That sometimes worries me with building stamina to the point where the owner can't sustain that over a long period of time. And then also, I kind of think about the whole, joints and the effects on the dog long term too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've heard different sides of the coin with that, right? Like, oh, you're just building an endurance athlete and things like that. And again, I think it really sort of depends, right? So I have two Belgian Malinois, which literally can go all day,
Sure.
and I'm very mindful about one safety. So I never play ball with my dogs on hard surfaces ever, 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 ever. I don't throw the ball for them in wet grass. Mountain biking, we're on dirt trails and stuff like that. Even when I run dogs, I tend to stick to dirt roads or trails because
Yep.
it's easier on the joints and stuff like that. And I definitely give ample breaks and things like that. I think being smart in terms of your dog's health, I think what's also worrisome is I see a lot of dogs that are quite a bit overweight and owners are, exercising them, that kind of thing, and not giving them ample time off and stuff like that. I think it's important to have your if you are a runner and you like taking your dog with you and that kind of thing, I think it's great. But at the same time, understanding just like we have to take care of ourselves
Yeah.
in terms of giving ample rest and breaks and things like that. My dogs all get joint supplements and things like that
Yeah.
as well.
I think that's super important. Just in
Yeah,
general, even if they're not super duper active with their dogs, I think it's important anyways.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So people have been listening to this and they're like, man, I need to start playing with my dog. What's their first step? What should they do?
Yeah, I think one thing for sure is, as you've watched some of the Ivan's videos, um, I think that's a good place to start is probably buying his Cornerstone collection. There is a um, possession games, which is really a great starting point. It teaches you how to play essentially a type of tug game with your dog,
Yep.
which is huge. The video, I mean, I've owned that video for so long and I still go back and watch it. It's a 3-hour video and I'll definitely reference it and go back to it. There's a chase and catch video, which is great, based off the game of fetch, which is awesome. And the thing about it too is people are like, man, I'm buying these videos to learn how to play with my dog. Yeah, because there's a ton of nuances and things in those videos that you're going to be like, I never realized this. Oh my goodness. And both of those videos are great. And there's also teaching the out command, drop it command, which
Yep.
is another great piece to watch as well, video to purchase. A lot of times people say their dog likes to take the ball, maybe not bring it back. I
Yep.
have to trade them for another ball or a piece of food or yada, yada, yada. And that's not truly cooperative play, right?
Yes.
Because again, you're starting to get into that like transactional kind of thing, right? So I think
Negotiation, even with,
negotiation,
yeah.
absolutely. So I think, possession games, chase and catch, teaching the out command would be a really, really good place to start.
I had a client a few months ago and they were playing with their golden retriever and two tennis balls. And I'm like,
Yeah.
do you have to play with both of them? They go, yeah. Do you
Yeah.
want to change that?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's get to work. Because they
Oh, yeah.
had a great relationship, and I should say
Sure.
have. It's not. They're still doing it. They have a great relationship with the dog, but let's just change things. Let's make it so you only have
Yeah.
to bring one. Because after a while, when you bring two, then all of a sudden 3 comes into the picture.
Sure. Sure.
And then that's a snowball effect that you just want to go down that path whatsoever.
Sure. Yeah, no. And if you played that game with my Malinois Evo, he would probably put all the balls in his mouth. He
Yeah.
he probably could fit like 4 tennis balls in his mouth happily.
Yeah. And let's just talk about toys for a quick second too, because I think as much as we're talking about play, I think knowing what kind of toys to play with is important as well. So
Sure.
what's kind of your go-to stuff here that you may start with?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things you have to consider. One, the size of your dog, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I have larger dogs, so a tennis ball is going to be way too dangerous for my dogs because they could probably swallow it. And
Yeah.
that's one thing you have to really keep in mind. So, my dogs are all the smallest one's probably 75 pounds. So if I was to say play with like a Chuck It brand ball, I always opt for the large size. And the majority of the time, if I'm playing chase and catch with my dogs, I like to have a rope attached to the end of the toy for a number of reasons. God forbid, they did bite it in half and I could yank it out if I needed to. And two, it is just helpful not to pick up a slimy ball, right?
Amen to that. That is one thing I've enjoyed about those types of toys is you don't have to put your
Uh-huh.
hand on that.
Yeah. And, texture and things like that are really going to depend on dog breeds and things like that. Another reason I don't like tennis balls is when they do get like gritty and stuff like that, they can wear down dogs' teeth pretty badly. So I try to avoid those at all costs. Those are definitely a no-no. When it comes to that.
Yep.
And tug toys, it really is, again, it's going to kind of depend on how aggressively your dog tugs. I have a lot of those French linen tug toys with the two handles on either side for more of like the kind of powerful, really bitey dogs. And then when it comes to dogs that just, maybe like to play a little gentler, sometimes like a braided fleece toy or a rope toy or something like that. And I also too be mindful with those types of toys, not to necessarily leave them out because sometimes they like to pick away at them and chew them
Yeah.
and swallow parts and pieces of them. So it can be dangerous. So
Yeah.
I tend to, a lot of my interactive toys, I kind of save for when we're doing things together, just because those balls on the rope, I know my dogs, for instance, would probably eat the rope and then we'd have a problem.
Yeah. So you're putting them up in between play sessions and
Yeah, I
stuff, right?
usually am. Yeah, just it's more for a safety thing, not that they can't have them. It's just,
Right.
making sure they don't eat
But
things they shouldn't.
But I
They're
also
not.
find too during that time that it increases the value of it, right? Because it's not always available with the toy. And that it also kind of signifies to the dog like, hey, it's kind of go time. It's time for us to play as well. If you and I went to play basketball and we show up and neither one of us has a ball, well, guess what? This isn't going to be anywhere near as fun as if
Right.
we both brought one, because then we can each do
Totally.
our thing and then we can play, right?
Yeah, totally. And I always open it up with, you want to play? Like there's
Yeah.
some sort. I'm surprised I didn't hear some barking because I just heard that. I always open it up that way so they
Yeah.
know it's go time instead of like, hey, I'm just organizing or cleaning toys,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So having that kind of like, hey, it's go time.
Right. All right. What's the one thing that you wish dog owners knew?
Oh gosh, like new. What do you mean?
Just in general about their dogs.
Let's see. That's a good question.
Like, what do you think is missing from most dog owners' toolbox and knowledge?
Yeah, I think a lot of it that's missing is understanding the breed or breeds that they have and the genetic component of who and what they are. So oftentimes I think people get into dogs or get a dog because their neighbor had one or their grandma had one or they
Yeah.
look cool, and they don't necessarily fully understand the type of dog that they have and what it actually takes to fulfill those needs, and maybe putting unrealistic expectations or putting their expectations on the dog. They may want to take their dog to the farmer's market or the brewery, but the dog is clearly like, this is not my jam. I'd rather not. So
Yeah.
I think figuring out how to fulfill their dog in a way that works for them both, I think, is something a lot of dog owners are missing the mark on.
Yeah. I want to rewind real quick because when we were talking about how dogs were everywhere in Vermont, you were talking about kind of in passing about, there might be some dogs that just don't actually want to go anywhere.
Sure.
How would somebody know that with their dog?
Well, I mean, you live with your dog, and there are certain times where you can look at your dog and understand like, hey, this is something he does not enjoy doing. Yeah, there's going to
Yeah.
be things that he's going to have to do in life, like go to the vet and
Sure.
things like that. But I think it's important to find what your dog does enjoy, and you might have to try a few things. You might be a trial and error thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Hey, maybe my dog doesn't like the water, doesn't like to swim, or hey, maybe my dog actually really loves going on hikes with me. I think it's a trial and error to find what your dog truly enjoys, what your dog's true talents are, and finding a way that you and your dog can do something together that both you can enjoy as a team. And that could be who knows what, but I think it's the kind of thing of knowing and figuring that out. But putting those unreal expectations of like, hey, I really want my dog to go to doggy daycare, and he's just miserable there, or getting into
Yeah.
fights and that kind of thing. It's like, well,
What are we
clearly he's
doing?
telling you he doesn't like it. So
Yeah.
why make matters worse?
Yeah. For me, it's like almost, the dog that's, maybe you're taking it to a restaurant that you can eat outside and they just can't settle.
Yeah.
They're just not comfortable in that environment yet. Doesn't mean that they won't ever be,
Sure.
or constantly reacting. And then I think that's when we're really looking at it and going, okay, we're really just setting this dog up to fail repeatedly.
Sure.
And of course, whatever we practice, we get better at. So you don't want them to get really good at just, letting their emotions run so high that it's just not good for anybody.
Yeah, no, agree. And yeah, and then if your dog can get there, maybe you don't go out to dinner and do that. Maybe you just go for drinks on a quiet afternoon and focus on practicing just that alone.
Yeah. A nice
versus
Monday
trying to
afternoon instead of a Friday night.
Totally,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep. Jill, this has been great. I thank you so much for this. This is a great conversation. We're going to have to get together. I think we're going to probably have some fun with my little Frenchie because
Oh yeah, we gotta do some work with her, some
Yeah.
play with her. That's gonna be fun.
my vet describes her as 25 pounds of pure muscle.
I love it.
Which is good because, as you know, a lot of times we see Frenchies as these like roly-poly kind of things, and they don't really they don't breathe too well. The fun part about going to play with my dog is she's good we can go about 5 minutes straight, and then it's like rest time.
Yeah.
So it's not like one of your Malinois where they can go all day. And I honestly have to be the one to call it quits because she would go.
Sure.
Probably to the point of just plain physical exhaustion, but but it's been fun working her brain, and certainly anything that I can learn from you is going to help too. But so thank you again for coming back on this
Yes,
or coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This has been great. It's been a lot of fun.
For those of you that like to look up more about Jill, you can look up her website. It's MotoDogTraining.com, and she's also on Instagram. She gives you all the updates on what's going on with her board and train dogs, and that's MotoDog_training. So until next time, Jill, we'll catch up to you down the road.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, listen, baby. You can keep your pedigree family. This rescue dog is through with you.